I'm Greg Giuliano. I'm an executive coach, organizational change consultant, and author. I believe leaders have the power to shape the future and change people's lives. I also believe people who challenge the status quo and go beyond usual and ordinary are rare. They're willing to go to the edge and push farther, over and over again. When I find these ultra leaders, I love to talk with them. In each episode, I talk with ultra leaders to learn how they do what they do and how they keep growing as leaders. I promise you a full dose of ultra leadership from other ultra leaders just like you in every conversation. We're at the edge of another episode. Let's jump in. Welcome to another episode of Ultra Leadership. My guest today is L. David Kingsley. David is Chief People Officer at Illumio. His approach to HR leadership is hypothesis-driven, metrics-focused, and outcome-oriented. He and his team enable growth through focused initiatives around workforce and succession planning, leadership development, employee experience, and employer brand initiatives on a global scale. The teams he serves focus on delivering customer and stakeholder value at speed in high-growth industries and markets around the world. In my conversation with him before we came on the air, I learned he is passionate about scaling through culture and technology and data to drive employee engagement. I'm thrilled to have him on the program today. Welcome, David.
Greg, thanks so much. It's a pleasure to be here and a real honor to join you.
I'm looking forward to this because we were having a conversation earlier about our experience over the years of watching new leaders step into roles, be promoted because they're awesome at what they do, but then kind of thrown to the wolves that left to their own devices because it's a whole new skill set when you're a people leader versus I was great at sales or great at marketing, right? So now I've got to be great at teaming. And so that's where I want to start with you today. It's like, you have a young leader in your organization and you're going to promote them because they're a rock star and their first time in their role. So what's your advice to those young leaders who this is their first time leading a team?
Yeah, well, Greg, thanks so much. And before I get underway, I just want to add one more element of my introduction, which is actually the most important part, that I'm the husband and the spouse and the partner to my wife, Erin, and the dad to our children who are almost 5, almost 4, and almost, 1.5. And that's my most important role. It is an honor and a pleasure to be able to be a chief people officer and certainly to do that at a company like Illumio. A mission-focused company like that is a real pleasure and a highlight of my career. At the same time, the most important job I have are those first jobs that I talked about. So just wanted to make that up front. And I think that, frankly, speaks to a little bit of the question you're asking is, when you're a good leader or an aspiring good leader, and I am an aspiring good leader, I think I'm getting better every year. I've been trying for now 24 years. I'm getting better every year. And I think it comes from there is, first of all, making sure that a leader knows, why do you lead? What is your why? To borrow the Simon Sinek lens on things. And so thinking about, when you put someone into a leadership position, it's certainly more than being a superstar performer, which, Greg, I don't think like you, when I got my first leadership role, I think there was a little bit of it like, wow, David was a really good producer. He was a hard worker, showed up clean, brave, and reverent, no oatmeal on his shirt, no jelly on his face. And here we go. We're going to make him a leader now. And I was a really good executor. I was good at doing my work list and my tasks. And oftentimes that is the first qualification, of course, to be put into a role of greater responsibility, which in most organizations we think of, well, that person's ready to be a leader. At the same time, I think you and I and your audience would probably agree it's a vastly different skill set that really needs to show up when you move into a people leadership role. And it's a position of trust, position of honor, a position of privilege, and one of great influence that is a different form of driving value for the organization, similar value and high caliber value as to individual contributors, and just a different way to contribute. So going back again, I think it's around, how does a leader self-perceive and self-conceive? Why do I do what I do? Why do I want to be in this people leadership role? And then also acknowledging that just because someone was a superstar individual contributor does not necessarily make them fully ready for management. It's kind of the old, well, Jenkins, we see you destined for management. And it's like, well, Tell me more, ma'am. Why would you like me to be in management? Why would you like me to be in leadership? And I think really being thoughtful and planful about that for especially us as senior leaders of how are we setting that bar? What are those criteria by which we say someone is ready to move into that role? And then when we decide that, how do we evaluate them in earnest for it? And then how do we support them when they enter that space?
I love that. And I'm curious in very practical terms. Imagine that I'm in your office and you're telling me, hey, Greg, we're going to make you a people manager. What would you tell me is really important for me to focus on in my first 90 days or as I step into this role for the first time? What should I pay attention to? Because I've been really good at all the tasks. I'm great at execution.
Mm-hmm.
If you wanted me to succeed in this, what would your advice to me be? But here, Greg, these 3 things, these 4 things.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Greg. And I think that I'll probably start with one, and maybe there's one important one, but I'll tell it in the framework of a story. This was pretty early in my career. I was in management consulting before I got into HR proper. And I was with Accenture and Booz Allen for about the first 13 years of my career. And the first people leadership role that I got invited into, I had been in the firm, call it 2 or 3 years. Again, working hard, doing my best, keeping my head down, making my deliverables, hitting the deadlines. And my senior leadership team came to me and said, we'd like you to take on a team member. We'd like you to move you into a team lead position. And I thought to myself, oh my goodness, I didn't know I was ready for that. And so I said, well, who would be on the team? And they told me who would be joining the team. And it was this guy named Danny. And Danny, if you're out there, hello. I miss you. I enjoyed working with you. And I'll tell you, Danny was a couple years older than I, had been in the firm a little less time. I think he had transitioned, and he was definitely a mid-career professional. And when I was looking at his background, I found out he had been a manager at Target. And maybe like you, I place a lot of value on folks in those leadership roles, especially in retail. They have really hard numbers to make. They're under tight deadlines. They've got the whole public relying on them, big brands behind them. And sure enough, Danny had led a whole team. So I'm picturing him, in the authoritative red polo shirt, leading his team at Target during the holiday rush. And can you imagine a higher order crucible of leadership than being a people leader in retail at the holiday season? So I'm thinking about this guy and I'm like, wow, he really knows what he's doing. And he's been a manager. And now I'm going to partner with him and he's going to be on my team. And I remember that sense of trepidation that went through my head and my heart as I was thinking about this. And at the same time, as I was talking to my leaders and my parents even, my dad said to me, he said, David, this is your chance. And he said, the most important thing that you can do as a leader, and he was a people manager for many years of his career, he said, the most important thing you can do is be of service. And so, Greg, that would be my first and largest and most important answer to your question is, each of us in leadership roles, I would almost love to change the word leader to server or servant, that we are of service to our teams. And at the end of the day, our teams don't work for us. We work for them. And our job is to be of service to those people. And so as I was entering that first opportunity to be in a people leadership role, again, leading someone who I thought, was much more a leader in his own right than I was at the time, I thought, okay, how can I be of service? And so Danny and I partnered together. And I think if you walked into a room where we were having a meeting, you wouldn't know who was whom in that hierarchy because we really didn't run it like that. It was really, how are we partnering together and where can I be of service to what you're trying to do in your part of the business, serving our clients? And so I kept that lens on it, not really knowing how to be a manager. I hadn't gone to manager training or, that was before the days of podcasts and webcasts and webinars. There was no YouTube or Spotify. It was just, maybe you had a book on your shelf that was like Management 101. I didn't read any of those. I just got tossed into it and I tried to be of service. And so I think that's what it really comes down to. And then the other pieces, are outgrowths from that.
So I love that. Back in the day when I was first starting, it was you're the manager, you tell people what to do, you make sure that they do it. Once a year, there's a performance, conversation, and then they start to cycle over again. And that, thankfully, is not the model that works today, and that it's not what people want today. That we've grown past that, and creating a space where, if I'm showing up to serve, and I loved the way you said, we exist to serve the team. It's not the other way around, right? So I love that we've gotten to that point. That's truly empowering for people. That my job is to create the conditions for you to really engage, to feel empowered and be empowered to activate and shape your work. and make the contribution that only you can make.
Yeah.
And that to me is, there's no one size fits all to leading a team. Every individual, then it's like, okay, now I've just got to be present to this person who's very different from that person, both on my team. And what do they need? What does the team need collectively? And what does each person need from me in order to show up and be their best?
Yeah, I completely agree, Greg. I think you put your finger right on it. And I'll share with you, I think, the three most powerful words in leadership. Before I share those, though, I'll tell you the art and practice of leading is very much to create and construct and serve the very highest performing team that you can create as a leader, and holding an extremely high bar for quality. And that quality comes in terms of functional skill, and possibly even more importantly, when you're creating that team, a team who works well together and creates space for each other where they can operate with respect for each other's individual roles and the ability to lean on each other. And so as a leader, the first order of business is that, I think, is creating a team, comprising a team that has, for which you've held a very high bar. Once you've done that, the three most powerful words in leadership, I think, and I do try and practice, and I try and practice them with sincerity, are, I trust you. I trust you. And that says to that person, I've asked you to serve in this role. I've asked you to be in this position in our organization, in our team, in our company, in our government, in our nonprofit organization, in our military, because I believe that you have the factors that make you successful in this job. And maybe it's not always 100% of the functional skills. Maybe it's the hustle, the grit, the determination, the hunger, the aspiration, and you're going to grow some of those skills. Or maybe it's you have real skill mastery in this area that requires absolute knowledge of this space. Whatever it is, once you've decided that that person is on that team in that role for a reason, and you feel really confident in that, the three most important words you can say to them are, I trust you. And for them to know that you've got their back, you're giving them top cover or air cover. We might say in the military, I see your flag behind you. I did 8 years in the U.S. Navy Reserves as an officer there. And when you got air cover, you know you can do what you need to do on the ground, in your role, with your customer, with your client, with your constituent, with your citizen, that you are trusted and empowered and enabled. And when you have that, you can move mountains. And you'll move mountains intrinsically. You won't do it because someone told you to or because the size paycheck you have. You'll do it because that's what you're motivated to do, because you know that you're trusted in a position where you're going to succeed and do your best work. And again, that comes from a leader creating a team they believe in and empowering them and trusting them.
Yes. I don't even know what to say, because I'm like, I jump through the screen and hug you, because to hear those, hear that, I mean, it's that I'm feeling empowered. So if a team member is feeling that, they're going to want to give their all. They're going to want to go above and beyond, right? Mm-hmm. And I love that that's your starting position, that I have this positive assumption about you, that you are capable, you're competent, you know what to do. If your performance is varying some way, if like there's a dip, if I trust you, my first thought is there's something in your way, not there's something wrong with you. Mm-hmm. So then my job as a leader is to help you figure out what's in the way and help remove that barrier.
Yeah, it's the classic, when someone's underperforming, either overall or in a particular area, the question of what's in their way. Is it skill? Is it will? Or is it hill?
Yeah.
Now, if it's skill and that person is the right person for the job, I need to get them some training, enablement, support, etc. That's if it's skill. If it's will, is the motivation there? Are they driven to achieve in this area? Or is something in their way, or is there a blocker for them that's causing their will to be blocked? Possibly this hour, this day, this week, this month? Or is there a greater will issue that the person doesn't want to do the job? And then third, is there hill in their way? Is there an obstacle that I, as their servant leader, as their server, am compelled to help them move out of the way, or move for them, or move with them? And to really raise that question, I'm noticing that this is an area that you're struggling with. And I wanted to bring it to your attention because I care about you and because I trust you. Here's what it is. And then you put it in front of them. Now you assess whether it's skill, will, or hill, maybe not use those words in the conversation, but to raise it and say, I'm hypothesizing. I want to check my thinking here, that it seems like X, Y, and Z. What are your thoughts? creating that open-ended dialogue, a place of trust where the person knows, most importantly, that I'm bringing this to you because I care about you. I'm not bringing it to you to make you feel bad, to beat up on you, to make you have a bad day, to make myself feel better, right? We've all seen those leaders who behave in ways because there's an unmet need somewhere in their lives. Not that. Get all that out of the way. Get your head right before you enter that arena of leadership. Again, that's a place of privilege. It's a place of honor to be in that space. And so as leaders, we're called to hold an even higher bar for ourselves, to be very self-aware, to be hyper focused on how am I showing up, because I've been asked or placed in this position of leadership, and my team have invested their most precious asset in me, in our company. That's their time.
Right.
Their time. It's not their money, not their possessions in the world, their time. It's the only thing that all of us have a limited amount of and you can't get any more of. So if someone's bringing me their time, that is the most precious gift. And if I, as their servant leader, am going to honor that, I'm going to spend that time with them and invest that time back in them to help them achieve and accomplish, and leave that interaction, leave that role, leave that job, leave that company better than they joined. That's the incumbency. So if we think about it like a bank, right? It's a trust bank that our employees put their time into, their assets, their money that goes into the bank. And as a bank, our job is to return that with interest. Okay, so they put $100 in. They better walk out with at least, I don't know, whatever interest pays these days, $103, $105. And if they go out with $95, they're going to say, wait a second, I took my most precious asset here and it's being returned to me with less value than I brought in. Right. That would be a real failure in leadership. So again, a couple of mental models maybe that I try and use. I'm not perfect by any stretch, but I try and use and I try and teach as well as I'm thinking about how can I strive to be a true servant leader.
As you're telling me this, if I'm that person sitting in your office, stepping into a people leader role, I'm a servant. The skill that it sounds to me that I need to really work on developing is the capacity for empathy and engaging other human beings.
Mm-hmm. It absolutely is. And I think it's getting really good at asking questions. I was saying to my team a couple days ago that if ever you're working for a leader who, in the course of a meeting or an offsite or whatever, they say, you know what? I got this. Find the nearest exit, run out the door, don't turn back, and call me, and I will help you get a different job somewhere. And if I'm the leader that says that, run away from me, because no leader has got this. We're all somewhere on that journey. And our job, just as you said, Greg, is to have that empathy and ask really good questions.
Yeah.
I'll frame it also in the way of being on others' agendas. Thinking about this stakeholder that I'm interacting with, this team member, this client, this customer, what are they trying to accomplish? What's important to them? And then if I'm in a people leadership role, what is my team trying to accomplish in their task today, in their role, in their job in this company, or in their career overall? And if I understand what that is, and I'm orienting around that, and that's my primary focus, and I operate from that place, I may not always be right. If you're like me, I'm wrong like 49% of the time. I'd say like 51% of the time I get it right. But you may be wrong. You won't be off track, though, because the person will know that you're coming to them from a place of service yourself as a leader, and they'll say, wow, you really care about me. You're really thoughtful about this. And I'd love to share with you some more color on what I'm trying to accomplish here, because I think we may be on a different page. Well, there you go. You've got an open, trusting dialogue happening there because that person knows you're coming to them from a place of service, in trust, and honoring the investment they're making in your company, in your team, in your organization. That's going to drive a higher quality outcome for your team every time. It may not be perfect every time. None of us is. At the same time, though, it will be higher value than if you came at it from a much different mindset.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask you a question. I appreciate that. This is really amazing from my perspective, just listening to you. I'm going to put you on the spot now.
Yeah.
And you've been very transparent about this. Leading this way, it sounds great. What's the habit you have that, I wish I didn't do that? It's the way that you might get in the way of your own success that probably a lot of other people have the same, habit. And they're working on it too. So what's the way that you might, get in your own way sometimes? And how do you catch yourself and get yourself back on track?
Mm-hmm. I think the one that I'm working on right now, just in full transparency, Greg, and anyone who's worked with me or works with me right now will tell you this because I'm very transparent about it. I think it's important for all of us as leaders who've reached a certain point in our career, especially in senior leadership roles, to trust our instincts. And when you know something needs to change in your business, in your team, have the courage to make the change. My area of development is in trusting myself and not relying too much on saying, oh, let's give this a little bit more time. Let's see how this goes. Most of the time, and you've probably heard this phrase, I can't remember which thought leader it came from, but it's a good one. If there's doubt, there is no doubt. Might have been Ray Dalio. And if there's doubt, there is no doubt. So make the call. You got to make the call. And if you don't make the call, your team and the people around you, your clients, your customers, them looking at you and saying, that person needed to make the call and they didn't. That's going to erode trust. That's going to erode followership because everybody else around sees it and they're just waiting for you to make the call as the leader. So really trusting yourself, making that call when you know it needs to be made. Again, my tendency tends to be, let's just see that unfold a little bit more. Let me give that a little bit more time. And sometimes, candidly, Greg, it comes in terms of when someone is in a role that you know that role may not be perfectly suited for them. It is, in fact, a dishonorable thing to keep someone in a role that you know is not the right role for them, because they will fail to take advantage of the opportunities in front of them that could be somewhere else. They could be in a different role, different job, different company, different organization where they'd be growing and thriving. If they're not growing and thriving and you've done what you can do as a leader and it's still not working, then it's time to make a change. And you got to make that call and make it sooner and more timely. And I think every senior leader would look at themselves and say, that's something I'm working on. I'm getting better at decision making, better at pattern matching, better at making the tough calls sooner. And again, 51% of the time, we as leaders get paid to be right. It's at least got to be there. Even, I don't know, a 300 batting average gets you in the U.S. Baseball Hall of Fame. I never cracked 100 myself, but it's being aware of the fact that our job is to make the right calls as often as we can, and in the aggregate, do them for the right reasons and make them decisive. I had a colleague of mine, she used to say, I may not be right, but I'm not confused. And I love that. I love that phrase. Anna, if you're out there, I still use that every day. And it's true. It's our job is to be thoughtful and be decisive and build the best teams we can.
Well, right. At the end of the day, if you notice a problem and you don't address it, then you're actually the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Because you saw it and you didn't do anything. So now you're the problem. So I really appreciate your transparency and your vulnerability and sharing that. I'm so grateful for you spending this time with us today. Man, it flew by. I want to ask you, something I always like to end with the expressions of gratitude because it makes us feel better. It's good for our brains to hear gratitude and to express gratitude. I'm grateful for you spending time with us and sharing your experience and wisdom with us. What's something you're grateful for today?
Greg, I'll put it in a couple of different frames. First of all, thank you to you and really appreciate what you do on this podcast with your listeners, with your speakers. And I'm as much of a student as anything of the folks that you've had on. My goodness, you've had some people who I admire and aspire to be like in my own career, in my own life. And people like you who are helping us drive the dialogue forward. Really appreciate that. You're doing some really important work in our industry to keep this conversation going. And all of us are on our journey of leadership growth. And so thank you to you and your colleagues and the team who helped produce this podcast for putting that together. That's a critical part of all of us getting better. So that's my first gratitude is there to you and your team. My second gratitude, and it kind of goes out more broadly, so I won't name any names here, but it's to all the people who invested in me. And I am standing, maybe not even standing yet, I'm sitting on the shoulders of giants, of people who've invested in me, who've said, David is worthy of us investing in, making an investment and taking a chance on in some cases, of saying we've seen some things that we like and we're going to put our chips on him. And I try every day, and I tell myself every day is an interview. Every day is an interview that I am reapplying for my role, my job, whether it's as a board member. I'm on the board of Navati, a mental health company. I'm honored and privileged to work with Amelia, who's our CEO there. I'm honored to be at Illumio, being our chief people officer. I'm honored to be a dad and a spouse and a partner. And every day I try and wake up and honor that commitment, that risk that people took on me. My wife, chief among them. I think that was a pretty big risk. Now looking at me, she did, but I try and pay that back every day and honor those roles that I have the privilege of being in, and the people who took those chances on me and invested in me in business. I certainly stand where I am today because of their faith and confidence, and some hard lessons and tough love they gave me. I can just think back, every great leader and manager I had some tough love from them at one point. And it may not have felt great in the moment when I knew it was coming from a place of sincerity and investment and trust and gratitude. That sticks with me forever. And I try and live those lessons I learned from them. So gratitude to all those folks.
That's awesome. Well, please convey to my wife, to your wife and kids, my gratitude for letting you spend a little time with us today. I really, really appreciate it. And thank you to you for listening in to another fantastic episode of Ultra Leadership. If I do say so myself, we have really been privileged to hear from David today. David, I wish you all the best. Thank you for spending time with us. And until next time, we keep going to the edge, keep pushing further over and over again. That's how we grow as leaders. So we'll see you next time on Ultra Leadership. If you're enjoying Ultra Leadership, please take a minute and give us a review wherever you find your podcasts. And please stay in touch. Sign up for our Ultra Leadership newsletter at ultraleadership.com. Now, before you jump to your next meeting, I invite you to reflect on what you heard today. What stood out for you? What insight might you want to incorporate into your leadership practice? Until next time, remember, as a leader, you always have the power to shape the future and change lives. So go to the edge and push farther. Thanks for listening.
This is thepodcastfactory.com.